talk about your advocacy with animals. I know that if people are looking at your Instagram at all, they see that you have a love for wild horses and obviously your dogs behind you, but about
My dogs, I got guinea pigs, rabbits,
that.
rescue horse. I live in the border of Nevada and California, and we have a lot of natural wild horses on the West Coast. And so what's happening is live on the lands of the Bureau of Land Management. They're public lands. They're our lands. It's what we all pay, our states, and we pay taxes for. So I'm going to shorten their name so everybody understands it's the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM. But that's what they are called. And they are supposed to protect the lands, which means the elk, the deer, the coyotes, the burros, and the wild horses. So it isn't just the wild horses. The wild horses are growing in masses. There is a large percentage of wild horses but because we're developing so much, the horses are it's a little bit like deer. So you have to get a license to, kill a deer to help with the population. So with the horses, there is a similar thing. I'm trying to play both sides here, right? What the BLM says and then what the wild horse advocates are saying. So I live more on the side of of the wild horse, which is how can we stop so much breeding? And they have a way to help with sterilizing the mares. So it's a little hard because you have to have great, I guess shooters, if you call them. I don't want to say that word, but you have to have a good eye and you have to be able to have good aim and be able to get these horses sterilized so that they're not breeding so many babies, so that we can stop the thousands of horses that are going in to the roundups a year.
But how do they do that? They would tranquilize them and then do something with them?
They tranquilize them, and then that sterilization goes into the mare and it helps them. So when they do breed, they're not, it's like the pill.
They're shooting blanks.
They don't have to take it once a month. Yeah. And so I personally have gone to one of the holding facilities, the Palomino Wild Horse and Burro Holding Facility. And I mean, it's awful the way they round these horses up. I think in Nevada, they made a ruling they're not allowed to do helicopter roundups anymore, but they're rounding up these horses in Wyoming with the helicopters and they're killing some of these horses. And it's just really awful. You don't need to do it that way. But a lot of it has to do with the cattle ranchers, because the cattle ranchers want this land for the cattle to roam on, so they can feed, us. And it's just this vicious circle. And so instead of really having really great communication on how we can do this, the cattle ranchers have their government contracts. And the cattle ranchers are the ones that are holding the facilities. So you can imagine how much money the cattle ranchers are making.
Right.
And then they have incentives for the horses they do round up at auction. So you can only get 4 horses a year. The BLM can come to you and make sure that you're treating your animals great. And then after a year, you get your certificate, and then they can do whatever they want to the horses, which half of them end up in a kill pen.
Oh, wow.
Because another organization whom I love called All Seated in a Barn, Talia and her sister, they go to Texas and they try to buy as many horses as they can to save them from going to Mexico and Canada where they eat meat, horse meat.
Oh my God. I didn't even know any of this was happening. That's crazy. Are wild horses terrible with people? Do they not trust them? Are they considered mean? Like, what's their personality?
Well, I mean, they're wild, so of course they're not going to be docile, but they can be. I forgot the actual name of it. My apologies, but there's a holding facility in Nevada for convicts where they can go and rehabilitate a lot of these Mustangs into rideable horses. And so that's interesting.
Wow.
Those go to auction. And I think a lot of this is pretty cool. I think, I get what everybody's trying to do. I'm not trying to say one's worse than the other. I do think the roundups are awful though. So like when you go to the facility and you actually see how many horses there are, half of those horses are going to be in the kill pens. And so you just think it's so sad. And a lot of the horses, there's a new one in Winnemucca, which I just read about. Some of the horses, I think like I don't want to say a number because I don't want to be wrong on the number, but within 24 hours were died. A lot to think they were poisoned and whatnot. They have to go do some investigating on it.
Right.
Um, there was just something where some builders own a huge amount of property. They're doing construction on new homes, and there's a natural creek, and they put their fence on the other side of the natural creek, which technically is probably their property, and people went nuts. In Nevada, you're like, you're literally going to kill the horses because they have no water source because they put up this fence. And so now you're gonna have a bunch of dead horses, or you're not gonna open. And they're like, well, we left a gate open. Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry, I didn't know the horses knew where the gate was.
Right.
So good news, as of yesterday or the day before, the state is spending, I think, $60,000 to move the fence line on the other side.
Behind. Yeah.
But couldn't you have done that in the first place?
Right.
Construction
Right.
guys, you know?
I mean, it's just crazy. The people that don't care about animals, I just don't understand people like that to begin with. But
Yeah.
I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds like the horses seem to be a nuisance for these farmers and cattle ranchers that just want the land for things to make money. I mean, I get their vision behind it, but it just seems like these horses are, going to be endangered at some point, the wild ones.
Yeah, if they're not careful. I mean, I went out to an area and just outside of Sparks, Nevada, and there were 15 wild horses. And that same day, I drove to the Palomino holding facility, and there were hundreds of horses. And I'm like, you left 15 here? There is so much area for them to be in, and you're just
Wow.
letting them. It's just, and like I said, I do understand. There's a lot of them. There's a
Mhm.
lot of horses. I get it, but there's also a lot of land.
Right.